So here we go with Dave Cormack. Well, welcome to Dave Cormack, finally on the VolksCast radio. Dave, I got to start with what I ask everybody. Please tell me your VW story.
Ray, I've got so many. I guess the one that really did it for me, and it's the one I posted on cowlook.com so long ago about my friend's Hemi Cuda getting beat up by the inch pincher. And this was like, I guess, 1970 or so, and I had a Hemi Roadrunner that was basically stock, and my friend had a Hemi Cuda. And we had taken off those horrible Carter AFBs and put on Holley 780 CFM carburetors and some Doug headers way before they became Doug Thorley headers, some ladder bars and some Castler cheater slicks. And this was a good high 11-second car. Well, we're at Orange County Raceway with it, where we're going to be checking some jetting changes and pulling plugs and looking at stuff on this Mopar. And he's sitting there going to-tump at the lights, and here comes this little orange bug, the pinch or something bug. And I thought, that isn't fair. They must not like this guy because it's run what you brung, and they're going this Cuda's going to kill this little Volkswagen.
Right.
They're going to have to let him get at least a half-track head start, almost like Pink's.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, of course, the tree came down even, and I got to say that Cuda was catching up fast at the top of the quarter mile.
Sure.
I mean, he was catching up, and if it had been a 1,500-foot quarter mile, would have been a whole different race, but the bug won.
Wow.
I was blown away. I was astounded. I was flabbergasted. So I stormed into the pits. I was actually kind of ticked. And this real nice guy named Daryl Vitone or something like that. What do you have in this car? And he goes, it's a Volkswagen. And I said, well, for radio, I'll say, recycled bull food. BS, you do not either. You've got a small block in this thing somewhere. And he goes, hang on. And he pulled the deck lid pins off. And sure enough, it didn't have a generator, and it had a carburetor on each side. But by golly gee, that was a Volkswagen motor.
Wow.
And that's what did it to me. That's when all of a sudden I went, you can mess up a small block Chevy and make it go faster.
Sure.
You can do the wrong stuff and get more power out of it. But when you can take a VW Bug and beat a Hemi Cuda, okay, now you have my attention.
Absolutely. So kind of tell me about those early days. Can you kind of paint that picture for us about those early Volkswagen days? What was the first Volkswagen that you bought?
My first one was a brand new off the showroom floor red 69. And if I could ever find it, California license plate Zulu Quincy Sam 624. I'm sure it's been replated by now, but if I ever found that car, I don't care if it's been made into a roadster, Baha'd, rolled. I want it back. I'll fix it because I know what it looked like the day it came off the showroom floor because I was the one that did that.
Wow. So that's the first one you got. When did you decide you were going to hot rod a VW?
Actually, that came a lot later, back, pretty much in the early 90s.
Wow.
I had them off and on just because they were cheap and easy to work on, and I didn't have a lot of money being a, kind of a young, downwardly mobile hippie. So I had a succession of buses and bugs and squarebacks and stuff all through the 70s and 80s. And I guess in the 90s is when all of a sudden I just decided, it's time.
Right.
It's time to take this old bug and do something with it.
Nice.
And at the time, I had I think I had 4 or 5 VWs laying around. And I built a 1755, and I know what I'm saying. That's a 69-millimeter crank with the old NPR 90 pistons, so that probably dates it a little bit. And I had the state-of-the-art Cadron carburetors, ooh-ah.
La, 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 la.
Yeah.
Wow. That surprises me that it took you till the 90s before you really hot-rodded anything.
Yeah, at the time, like I say, I didn't have a lot of extra income, so I wanted to just keep them on the road and keep them cheap.
Okay. Tell me how did you fall into writing and photography and really your first was VW Trends? That was the first VW magazine you worked for, or was it Hot VW?
That is correct.
Okay, VW Trends.
And that all started excuse me, with a friend of mine, Lee Hedges, down in San Diego, was the vintage historical editor. I always called him the vintage hysterical editor for VW Trends. And he did a lot of the research articles, history of this, history of that. Well, he'd bought an old 64 bus that he was calling Friedrich.
Okay.
And he lived like 2 towns south of me, in San Diego County, and he was getting ready to take a family road trip in this bus, and he said, I want to go through the brakes on this thing, and I don't really know a whole lot about them.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, I've had buses all along, and I can probably do a brake job darn near blindfolded. You get all the parts, I'll come down, I'll bring my 46-millimeter socket, and we'll, take the drums off the back, and we'll do it right.
Right.
Well, we got it all done. The brakes work fine. He's happy, and I go walking into his house to start cleaning up my hands a little bit, and I see all these 8x10 or 8x11 manila envelopes, and they say something like Thing, Tennessee, Oval, New Jersey on them. And I said, Lee, what are these? And he goes, well, these are articles, they're features that Henry DeKuyper, who at the time was the editor of VW Trends, wants me to write, but I don't really want to do them.
Wow.
I'm more into the research and the historical articles, and I don't want to write features.
Right.
And I said, well, what are you going to do with them? He goes, I guess I'm going to send them back to Henry. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, Lee, why don't you get a hold of him and see what he says about letting me, try my hand at it.
Okay.
And he calls me a couple days later, and he goes, okay, here, do this thing from Tennessee. So I did, and I turned it in, and I really didn't hear anything. And about 3 months later, I opened up my mailbox, and there's a check from, at the time they were K3 magazines, not Prime Media yet.
Uh-huh.
And there was a check for $200. And what the heck is this all about? I'd pretty much forgotten that I had done that.
Now, had you written before, Dave?
No, I hadn't.
Okay.
No, and I mean, I've always been a little bit of a camera nut, but I'd never really, professionally photographed anything. I still don't know that if you ask Dean, I'm still probably not a professional.
Hey, I love the thumb in the picture every time. I think that's your signature series right there.
The which?
The thumb in the picture.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just
that would be me.
Just kidding. But so go ahead. You got a check for $200.
Yeah, and I saw Henry later on. I think I had my 21 window up at a VW Jamboree, and I saw Henry, and he goes, hey, and I had written a couple features for him since then. I was doing it as a part-time deal,
Uh-huh.
And I saw Henry at a VW Jamboree, and he comes up and goes, you obviously know your way around a VW, and you don't murder the English language too badly. How would you feel about coming to work for us full-time as our technical editor? And Henry, are you serious? At the time, I was working as a transit bus mechanic on a graveyard shift, which, wasn't all that thrilling.
So technical editor sounds like that's huge step right there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I went from being a bus, a transit bus grease monkey to technical editor for VW Trends in a matter of one weekend.
Nice.
And, Henry, and I showed Henry what I could do with the camera, and he said, well, okay, we got a little bit of work to do there. And he just kind of set me loose. He bought me, he showed me what to buy in the way of a Nikon camera and how to set it and how to do everything. Mm-hmm. And actually, to be honest, the first time I was out on my own was it was the old Whitman Raceway. Wow. And it was one of the VW, I think it was called the VW World Finals or something like that. And I had no idea what I was doing. And if you ever look at side-by-side coverage of that event, the coverage done by Dean at Hot VWs and Dave Cormack at VW Trends, you'll see that the shots at the racing are almost identical. Well, that is because, and I fessed up to Dean later, I had no idea what I was doing, and I knew Dean did, so I just kind of watched what he did, and I was right behind him shooting over his shoulder. And I'd change shoulders. I'd go from the right side to the left side of his head, so there's a little bit of difference, but not much.
That's great.
And I don't know if anybody ever caught that. I think Dean might have and always kind of wondered. And once I got to work for to Hot VWs, I fessed up. I said, if you ever wondered, it's because I was right behind you the whole time. I was your shadow. And I guess he never really quite knew I was back there.
Well, if you're gonna copy someone,
you might as well copy Dean.
Absolutely.
You might as well copy the best in the business.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? That actually begs a great question. In general, in the VW industry in general, who would you say are probably the top three? I don't want to use the term underappreciated, but just guys that just aren't really known that really have had an impact.
Well, first one would probably be one of my good friends, Richard Guarino, who ran the Inch Pincher 3 race car, the old split window, up and down the East Coast, got the car into the 10s, which was, we were doing it out here in the West Coast, but back in the East Coast, they were in a bit of a time warp, and they were a little bit behind us.
Right.
But he took that old split window, and I believe his best was a 1097. So that's one guy that, has been kind of under the radar all these years.
Okay.
Everybody else I could think of would be like Dino Don, who is, they broke the mold or split the case when they made Dino.
Yep, absolutely. Love Don.
And rest his soul, Andy Costello was a huge man. He was short in stature, but he was huge in heart.
Uh-huh.
There's so many, Ray. I don't know that I could really narrow it down to 3.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I love that perspective that people that have been around for a long time have, because we all know the Gene Bergs and all that of the world, and but there are so many guys that really made this where it is today, and
I guess maybe it would be the kind of all the unsung heroes, back in the day that were just still slugging it out in little one-man shops. They didn't have a state-of-the-art shop in Redondo Beach or Fullerton or Orange, The guys who weren't, shall we say, behind the orange curtain, the guys that are out in Texas and Florida and Ohio, doing their own thing.
Right. Now, go ahead.
That would be, I guess, probably to me the unsung heroes.
Okay. Now, tell me about just being at Trends. What was that environment like for you? What was the best part about that? What was just kind of paint that picture for me.
Okay, well, I got to work at Trends, and I was the technical editor at the time. That was September of '97.
Okay.
And they had a feature editor there named Bob Chavarsky that, bless his heart, wouldn't have known a Type 1 from a Type 3 if it ran over his foot. I mean, he didn't last too long, but he was a heck of a nice guy. But they didn't really want to send him out to events and stuff because I don't think his heart was in it maybe as much as it should have been.
Okay.
And he left the company, fairly soon thereafter. He had come to us from, I think it was Hot Bike magazine.
Okay.
And I did just a lot of traveling and a lot of events and a lot of features. And for a while, it was just Henry and I. And then poor Henry was shooting cars, trying to run the magazine, trying to put the magazine out. And he was traveling to events just about like I was every weekend during the summertime. And it's a good thing the guy wasn't married, because if he had been, he wouldn't have been. And poor Henry, bless his heart, I think he just started getting burned out. And I have a feeling and I don't know, but I have a feeling he told them, look, you find somebody else to come in here and run this magazine, because
right.
I can't do it all. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Right.
So that's when he basically kind of went back down to just shooting cars for VW Trends, and Ryan Price came in.
Uh-huh.
And that was interesting. Ryan, nice guy, and he was enthusiastic, and still is as far as I know, and I believe he still has quite a few VWs, but it was hard for him because he wasn't an old-time VW guy, from way back when.
Right.
And to be, to try to run a hardcore niche-specific, target-specific magazine, it was hard for him, and he got beat up a lot, via the internet and, phone calls and
sure.
stuff. And, I mean, his heart was in the right place, don't get me wrong.
Right. No.
But it was hard for him to go out there and, walk the walk and talk the talk when it was kind of all new to him.
Well, I would think that kind of environment, whether it's a Volkswagen magazine or, some other really specialized, because the market is not so big, you have to be very efficient. And that's got to be a difficult thing to kind of work at that level all the time.
Yes, it is. It really is. And, you try to please the readers, you try to please the advertisers, and you've got to try to please corporate prime media.
Right.
And that can get difficult and just pretty close to impossible. Just please everybody all the time. You can't do it. If you put in nothing but air-cooled cars, the Jetta, Golf, Rabbit guys growl.
Right.
if you put in a Jetta or a Golf or a Rabbit or something into VW Trends, then all of a sudden the air-cooled guys are screaming sellout.
Well, now the thing I always loved about Trends, I've always said if you took hot VWs and VW Trends and put them together, you'd have the perfect magazine. Because Trends always, it seemed like you guys were very willing to kind of go after whatever the new trend was and kind of look in those corners that sometimes are underserviced in the VW world. And I always found that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we kind of knew that, Hot VWs at the time was so entrenched and so good at what they did
Sure.
that it was going to be a David and Goliath type of deal. And if we tried to get ourselves into their arena, we were going to get our butt kicked.
Right.
And we knew it, so we had to find another avenue, and that's why sometimes the German look, or later on after I had departed there, they got into the VW hot rods like the Volksrod.
Right. Absolutely.
And they found a little bit off the the mainstream things to investigate and explore and show people.
Right. Now you left VW Trends. Was it just time to move on? You wanted to try something else, or?
Yeah, it was. It was nothing against anybody there, but when I was offered the chance by Dean, Dean and I lived basically at the time like 2 towns apart, maybe 10 miles away.
Okay.
And little does anybody know that there were times when Dean and I would be at a show somewhere. Well, I would have gotten the names of the show winners, but I wouldn't have gotten the names of the drag race winners.
Right.
And Dean would have gotten the drag race winners, but not the show winners. And there was a couple times we met in the middle, in basically a DMZ, him working for Hot VWs and me working for Trends, and we'd do this late night exchange.
Was it trench coaches?
Results. He'd hand me drag race results. We both got our stories in on time, and life was good.
Was it a dimly lit parking lot and trench coats and all that?
I think it was an In-N-Out burger.
Even better. So you decided to move on, and you went to Hot VW.
Because we were sitting at our favorite Chinese restaurant, his wife and my wife and Dean and I, and he said, "Well, would you ever consider working for Hot VWs?" And I, Dean's a practical joker. I'm sure you've met him, and
Yes.
he can pull some jokes, and I wasn't sure if he was serious about this or not. And I said, "Dean, are you serious about this?" And his wife Kathy told my wife, "Oh yeah, he's serious. They would like to have Dave over at Hot VWs." So I said, "Yeah, okay, I will do that."
Absolutely nice.
And it was just, to me, it was a step up. It was time for me to move up, on, around, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, so you went to Hot VWs, and just kind of, can you compare what was the atmosphere like? I'm always under the assumption that Hot VWs, it's a pretty open environment walking in and out. How was Trends? Because
it was a little bit more structured. I was very fortunate in that, when later, right before I left Trends, I was able to work at home because I was commuting 81 miles one way through the worst traffic in America. And there were days that I could make it home in about an hour and 20 minutes. There was also one day when I didn't make it home for 9 hours.
Oh, my goodness. That is
hardcore.
Hardcore.
By the time I got home, it was about time to take a shower, shave, and head back to work. So, so they let me work home, but it was still kind of structured. And Hot VWs, it's amazing. People, like next week during the Classic, I know they're getting people from out of town and out of country coming in to see the great grand corporate office of, Wright Publishing.
Of course.
Well, you go into this kind of nice little small building, and you'll see some guys in shorts and flip-flops and Hot VWs T-shirts banging away on Macs. And it's just relaxed. You show up and you sign in. There's no time clock. You just kind of sign in and go to work. And when you feel like it, you go to lunch. And when you feel like it, you get back. And everybody's just kind of relaxed. They're not sleeping, but it's relaxed.
Right. Okay.
And it was really cool. And everybody got along. We did butt heads from time to time, but that was only because everybody there was passionate about what they did.
Right.
And there would be differences, between RK and Dean and Bruce and I, and sometimes two would agree and two wouldn't, but it was only because we were passionate, because we liked what we did, and we wanted to put out the best that we possibly could month after month.
Right. And don't you think some of that friction, while at the moment might seem, oh my goodness, really is what helps the stuff to grow.
Yes.
Helped hot VWs grow, etc.
Yes.
What do you think? Me as a consumer, a guy who bought VW Trends and bought hot VWs every month religiously. What did I lose now that Trends is gone?
Ooh. Well, as we've mentioned, Trends, I think, had a tendency to be a little off the mainstream.
Sure.
They would still do the cow look cars and the drag racing and stuff, but
Right.
Later on they got into Formula V racing and the German look and the Euro look and things that, well, now Hot VWs is starting to cover that too. I
Sure.
mean, at one time I thought Hot VWs would never ever have anything to do with Volksrods. I just didn't think they would.
Uh-huh.
But then you see Howard's car on the cover and a big spread on Jeff Peterson's Hebroid,
Right.
and stuff that I didn't think they would ever really want to do. They are now.
Right. Now, and I'd asked Dean this question if he, it's kind of like doing time trials. Where you're racing against yourself. Did he miss the friendly competition between Trends and Hot VWs? And let's be quite honest. When you go to shows, you were just saying you run into Dean, and it's not like you're competing magazines. You're just good friends showing up at events. And
we'd compete. I mean, we'd run each other
Sure.
a foot race to get to the really cool feature cars. But after the cameras were put away, that same race would be run to see who could buy the first beer.
Right.
I
I asked him if he missed that, and it seems like he does. And do you think that's do you miss writing and shooting cars and all that?
I do miss it. And there is still the possibility that I might still freelance for Hot VWs a little bit every now and again. I mean, I don't believe I burned any bridges. I still talk with Dean from time to time, and I've talked to RK and Bruce periodically when I see them.
Uh-huh.
But living up here in Northern California, I don't see them much. This is kind of a VW wasteland up here.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, if they ever wanted me to do any kind of a feature or an event coverage, absolutely, and I do miss it.
Uh-huh. Well,
and it was interesting, the camaraderie, and the friendly competition. I've got to tell you that there was stuff that Dean, and bless Dean's heart, he'd do things like they had their little anniversary. I believe it was in '98 when they had their little toy Beetle, the Hot VW's anniversary Beetle.
Yeah.
Well, Dean took one, beat it with a hammer, set it on fire, and then sent it to VW Trends. Another thing, and I don't know if this was Dean, but it sounds just right up his alley. They had taken a box of chocolates, opened it up, eaten half of it, sealed it back up with cellophane, and sent it to, I believe it was Henry, who was the editor of VW Trends. Well, Henry never bothered to open it. He just thought, okay, well, here's a way to make our editorial assistant Sharon happy. So he gave it to her without ever opening it. So she opens it up and finds a box of half-eaten chocolates, and she comes back to Henry and basically gives him what for. So good shot, Dino. You got us with that one.
Well, I'll be seeing Dean at Mid-America Motorworks Fun Fest this week. So, why don't you give me your Fun Fest story? I know you've been there.
Probably my best one would be accidentally doing donuts with Eric Madsen's Pro Mod Gia in front of Mike Yeager's, corporate headquarters.
Accidentally?
Well, I knew what a locked rear end, what a spool would do, but I was just caught in the moment.
Sure.
This was not the orange Gia. This was the old silver and maroon Gia that he had.
Uh-huh.
And I guess maybe it was in super gas at the time. But he had that out at Mid-America Fun Fest because at the time Madsen Racing was, their major sponsor was Mid-America Motorworks.
Yeah.
So he had towed that, and, his wife and kids were out there with him, and he had it sitting out there on the lawn. And I teasingly said, "Hey, can I fit in this thing?" Because at the time I was kind of chunky.
Big bone.
And he said, "Yeah, I bet you could get in there." So I got in, and I said, "Okay, where are the keys?" And he goes, "Turn the kill switch and hit the start button." And I thought, well, okay. So I hit the kill switch and hit the start button, and the thing fired right up. So I put the thing in gear and started driving around the front lawn. Well, with a locked rear end, with, a spool in that thing, they just dry hop around corners.
Right.
Well, it did kind of skid around in the lawn pretty good, but it dug some pretty good ruts. And I mean, his car, I mean, there was no low end. That gear was either you're on the gas or on the brakes.
Right.
There is no really anything past idle except about $8,000. So, I'm spinning around and I'm throwing grass everywhere, and I'm getting, the slicks are throwing mud and grass up underneath his fender wells, and Eric's just kind of shaking his head going, "Oh, you know what? You're a fool." But that'd probably be my favorite Mid-America story, and bless Mr. Yeager's heart, he never gave me any trouble about it. I'm sure he wasn't happy.
You know what? The thing people should know about Mike is a big fan of the burnout. So he might have had that face on just because he didn't want everybody to do it, but he probably secretly loved it.
Well, he might have.
Well, I should tell people that Bruce Myers, one of my favorite interviews ever doing the show.
We're not worthy.
Is because of you. Why don't you tell people about Bruce, and what he means to you?
Bruce is my other dad. I love that man. Oh Lord, I love that man. He did so much for so many, for so little appreciation for so long. He's not an unsung hero anymore. But, 15 years ago, yes, he was probably the king of the unsung, unappreciated heroes.
Right.
Without him, where would off-roading be? It would be around, but would it be where it is now? He basically started VW off-roading.
He started an industry,
He started the whole darn thing. Yeah, he did.
Yep.
And, I mean, to know that he got literally ripped off for his design,
right.
Tried to sue the people that stole his design and lost,
right.
And spent untold, I don't know how much money he spent, fighting a losing battle. It irritated me.
Right. Right. Well, he's working on a book, which I hope he finishes quickly because I really want to read it.
Oh, I do too.
I mean, what a fantastic guy.
He is, like you said in your interview on the VolksCast, he is a Renaissance man. He's been there, done that, and he's so unaffected by who he is and what he's done and how many people he's helped.
Right.
He's completely unaffected by it. And the little joke is, every time I'd see him, I'd bow and scrape and go, "We're not worthy. We're not worthy." And he just, "Oh, stop it. Just get up. Would you knock that off?" Yeah, and I'd just do it to embarrass him.
Tell me some of the other people in the industry that you really enjoy.
I was very fortunate some years ago to actually get to know Joe Vitone, the founder of Impy.
Uh-huh.
And being able to talk to him and find out what he was like in the old days and, how he got his start in VWs and what he thought of Volkswagen of America and all that, that was fascinating.
And can I spill the beans a little and tell everyone the treat you're going to give us? You actually did 20 questions with Joe Vitone a few years back.
Back in, I think, about 2000 with VW Trends, yes.
Okay, in 2000. And his hearing is totally gone now, pretty much.
It's
for the phone.
It's hard for him to talk on the phone now.
And you were trying very hard to help me out and put me in touch, and so I could do an interview. But that's just not going to be possible. But but because we can't do that, and you and I both feel very strongly that it's important that his voice is recorded down with everyone else on the show. You were actually going to send me that interview, your recordings. and I'm going to put them together for VolksCast, and I'm very appreciative about that.
Anything I can do to help people appreciate what some of these pioneers did for us, I'm happy to do.
And so you're lucky enough to really get to know Joe and anyone else? And don't say Steve Mathy, for God's sakes.
Oh, yuck. Ew. Did you hear he actually this last weekend proposed to his lady love, and the poor girl accepted?
Well, can I tell you something? I was the only one that knew ahead of time that he was going to do that. I didn't know he was going to do it in such a how can I say it and be politically correct? I didn't know he was going to do it in such a I should really be a girl way. But
and I've met Heidi, and she's actually, that notwithstanding, she's a very intelligent girl.
I thought she was. I really thought she was.
I don't know where the lapse in judgment is coming from.
It's the medication she's on.
It must be. It must be.
So excluding Steve, anyone else?
Probably Andy Costello. Of all of them.
Tell me about Andy, because here's somebody that I have no personal experience with, and I'd be interested to know more.
He was kind of quiet. He didn't really talk a whole lot until he got to know you, and I guess I met him when he was running the Performance Technology Fastback that crashed at Whitman, 1997, and that's when I got to meet him.
Okay.
And I guess one of the high points of my career was followed 2 weeks later by one of the low points of my career. The high point was I got to be at Andy Costello's 33rd birthday, and the cover that we did at VW Trends with him and his scraggly beard holding his helmet that said Sundance Kid with his Pro Stock car behind him, I was able to get that put on the frosting of his birthday cake.
Wow.
Now, Andy had brain cancer, and we kind of all knew it was just if, or just when, not if.
Right.
But at his birthday party, I said, "Okay, Andy, here you go. What do you want out of go ahead and cut the first piece of cake." And even though he wasn't doing so hot at the time, and it took him a long time to do it, he surgically removed the engine out of that car. I mean, he did not catch a velocity stack with that cake cutter.
Wow.
He surgically removed the motor out of that car, and that was a high point to be able to help that guy. Probably one of the low points was 2 weeks later when I had to stand up at his funeral and tell everybody, "Well, this is what the Costello family would like you to know about Andy."
Really?
But he was he was only probably 5'6", 5'7", but he was huge.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty amazing, because again, here's somebody, and that has got to be the best thing about the internet. Before the magazines, when you would read about a guy, you didn't feel you knew you both liked the same kind of car, but the internet has really connected people.
It has.
And Trends was very aggressive on the website side. In some of the things they did by putting articles up and all of that. What do you think? Do you think the internet has helped Volkswagens grow, or do you think even without the internet, the VW community would still be as thriving as it is right now?
I think it's probably helped. I mean, because it's become, rather than a local hobby in just California or the Western United States or the United States, you've got people from Belgium, Finland, South Africa, Vladivostok, for crying out loud, Russia, talking to people back and forth, and it's become, like the CalLook.com, the global meeting place.
Right, absolutely.
And before, hey, we couldn't get semaphores over here, and the guys in Germany couldn't get, non-amber top taillights.
Wow.
And right-hand drive stuff over here was unheard of.
Right.
And over in Germany, good luck finding a left-hand drive. So, there's been an information and a parts exchange, and now all of a sudden you can find a split window from Belgium that gets shipped over here, and I think it's increased. I still don't think anything will ever replace the printed media.
Of course not. No, people like to have stuff in their hand.
Yeah, something that it's tangible.
Right.
But I do believe the internet has helped.
Okay. Yeah. I absolutely believe that. And I think it has totally brought the community. Well, obviously, look at me. I mean, I'm like the perfect example. You know, that I owe everything to this little show about VW. So I'm I'm the walking embodiment of really what the internet's done for this community. What kind of VWs you got laying around now, Dave?
The only one I have now, other than the wife's Jetta, which is only mine if it's dirty, needs work, or out of gas, would be
Good
my
woman.
old Polar Silver oval window with my VW Paradise built 2017 with IDAs and Real Raider wheels. And this little town I live in, they weren't. There was a couple people who knew about VWs,
Uh-huh.
but after I managed to embarrass a 5.0 Mustang and a 383 Barracuda, the word's kind of gotten out in town. Was it Saturday? I was at an all makes car show, just barely into the over the Oregon border, and the class I was in, it was called foreign modified, and there was a 240Z with a small block Chevy in it.
Uh-huh.
And when I took first place over him, he was kind of like a little bit annoyed. And it just kind of so happened that we were both at the same stoplight at the same time when the light turned green. And so in front of all the people at the car show, well, it's kind of like the old inch pincher versus the Hemi Cuda story. By the time he got done smoking his tires and having spring wind up and, wheel spin and everything, heck, I was clutching for third. So, yeah, I just kind of added insult to injury to the guy. I haven't seen him since and probably don't want to until he cools off.
That is great. So that's all you got. Any is there a VW that you haven't owned that you'd like to own? I know we asked the tough questions here on the VolksCast.
Muffler Mike's car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could have Muffler Mike's car. And interesting story about that. He had
Please.
won I think I told you this during the Muffler Mike interview, that it was at the Phoenix Bugorama, and here's a big shock. Muffler Mike had won, Pro Eliminator again.
That's weird. That guy can't drive, and he keeps winning. It's amazing.
Yeah, go figure. Anyway, there was another one of those deals where I just opened the door, climbed through the cage, started the car, and Mike looked at me and just kind of shrugged his shoulders. So I took off driving it down in the pits, and I was having a ball. And people, what are you doing driving Mike's car? And I said, I just bought it. And some people actually believed it. And I think his wife, Amanda, just kind of looked at me and went, oh, you better not have.
Oh, that's great. And Mike is a great guy, by the way.
One of the best.
Finally got to meet him in person at Blow It when we taped that Blow It Up, and yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, one of the best.
So, Dave, I'm going to put you on the spot right here on the show and ask you, Air Cooled Drag Racing Monthly is doing a Hall of Fame, a VW Hall of Fame. They're doing a huge undertaking. And my contribution to the Hall of Fame, hello? Are you still there?
Hi, we lost it.
Oh, that's great. You know what? I'm going to edit that just a little, and I'm going to leave that in because that was funny because I said I was going to put you on the spot. Next thing I know is you hung up.
I did not.
So Air Cooled Drag Racing Monthly, they're putting together this Hall of Fame, which is a huge undertaking. And as my contribution, what I'm going to do is anyone that's in the Hall of Fame that I've interviewed, I'm going to do some edit some special shows together for those people. And obviously there's a lot of guys that I don't know and didn't ever know. And I would like you to be my guest host and do some of those shows with me.
I would be honored.
Excellent. Excellent.
You bet. Yeah, I'm actually one of the judges for the Hall of Fame, and, it's quite an honor. I mean, if you look at the rest of the names on that list, I mean, Dave Caywell, for crying out loud.
I know. I'm humbled. I'm on there, too.
Oh,
Very
I am beyond humbled. I am, overwhelmed humbled.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you talk about we're not worthy.
Really. I'm totally with you. But yeah, I'm gonna do that. I want to do that. Have you as a guest host, and I've got a couple other guys in mind, and really make it kind of a community project. Because I really feel the big thing with VWs is just finding out what you can do. Some guys can build motors, some guys can race, some guys can build show cars. I can babble like a moron, so that's what I do.
Well, I've been accused of being good at that myself.
Well, Dave, I'd love to have you back on the show. And would you come back?
Yes, I would have. I'd love to. I'd be honored, Ray.
Excellent. Well, Dave Cormack, thank you, sir.
You're very welcome, and hello to everybody out there. The editor formerly known as K for Dave is alive and well, and he's headed out to go salmon fishing. So there.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Ray.